And so I will have our panelists introduce themselves and give a little bit of background about why they're here today. Ali, you can go ahead.
Hi, Andrea. Hi, Patrick. Hello, everyone. Yeah, my name is Ali. I'm a certification developer at InterSystems. I've been developing exams for 3 years now, and before that, I used to deliver technical training for around 5 years. So I've been in this space for a while, maybe not as much as Patrick, but I've been here.
By the time you get to my age, you will have been in the industry as long as me. Hi there, my name's Patrick Coates. As my little profile there says, I've been in the industry a very long time. Obviously, I'm working with Certiverse now, but I've also worked at various organizations in the industry, and I'm currently CEO of the E-Assessment Association, which is a not-for-profit which focuses on all aspects of technology-enabled assessment. So we had our conference last week, and we actually had sessions on proctoring and secure exams. So I've actually got a little bit more information than I probably had a week ago from that. So I'd be delighted to share that with you.
Fantastic. All right. So as mentioned, this will be basically Q&A. We do have some pre-planned questions that we will get into and go through with our panelists, but do be thinking about questions that you might have that we can either get to at the end, or if you have follow-ons to things that we discuss as we're going, again, feel free to jump in. So we will get started. So our first question is, how can certification programs ensure that test security is being maintained when you are dealing with asynchronous and remote authoring from subject matter experts all over the world? So we'll have Ali start off with this one.
Yeah, sure. So I work for a tech company, and in software development, there's this concept of least privilege. What that means is that if someone is working with sensitive data, then they should be given the least amount of privileges and permissions that they need to do their job. So in the certification space, that sensitive data are item banks and questions. So to apply this concept of least privilege, we rely on a Certiverse feature where subject matter experts assigned to exams and item banks can only see the specific questions that they are currently authoring. They're not allowed to kind of jump over and see what other experts are working on. You just see their question. That way we limit the amount of exposure. People can't see each other's questions, and we kind of limit the number of people who can see questions outside of the exam context. But it's not just like kind of relying on Certiverse. We also have to be proactive about assigning people and to item banks and removing them from them. And when it comes to, for example, working in the ANGOF stage, in ANGOF, and SME has access to many questions. So what we need to do is we have to be careful and then remove them from an ANGOF session when that session is done. So just so that they don't have access to these questions after an exam session. And some other stuff that we do is that we do train subject matter experts when they're authoring questions, to use AI responsibly. What that means is that let's say that they have access to an AI tool. If that AI tool uses their prompts in their training data, then we ask them not to use it. Their prompts, which they use for authoring questions, should be private, because otherwise you'd have like a question leakage. So we ask them either to use the Certiverse AI, or if they have access to a private AI tool that doesn't train on the prompts, then we say, yeah, you can use it. And we also, when we're training SMEs, we ask them not to discuss the questions that they're authoring with other SMEs. That way, we want to limit that exposure of these questions. And we do ask them to sign non-disclosure agreements or NDAs, just so that we can have that formal agreement from SME that they'll work with us on upholding the exam security.
Fantastic. That's a great summary and task list throughout. Pat, do you have anything to add on to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very comprehensive answer. So I'm trying to think of things that he hasn't already mentioned. But I think the thing about security is it's not just one specific thing; it's a range of things. I speak to organizations every day that are migrating, hopefully over to the Certiverse platform. And one thing that amazes me, a lot of organizations are still using Google Sheets, sharing documents online. There isn't any security associated with it. Anyone can be looking at it. So I think the big thing at a very basic level is having role-based access. So depending on who you are, within the platform. It controls what you have access to. So obviously an admin's got access to everything, but then you can break it down to a program level or an individual exam level. So for example, an item writer on a particular exam, that's the only thing that they see, the items that they write or the items that they're reviewing. So you can actually limit the exposure of those items. I know there have sort of been, very drastic stories about when organizations have had whole exams leaked by one of the people who was in a room. One of the item writers shared all the content with someone, thinking it wasn't going to go any wider. The whole exam got compromised. So actually having that sort of role-based access makes a huge difference. I think as well, even you could take that further. If you're translating, you've got translator modes. So a translator can translate the content. You can have multiple translators, etc. So I think it's sort of ensuring the security of content. The other thing as well is if you've got more SMEs, and that's the best thing about the platform, we've got asynchronous platforms. You can have SMEs anywhere in the world writing content. I'd much rather have 20 SMEs write 10 items than 10 SMEs write 20 items. So it makes it a lot easier to be able to engage more subject matter experts who can write more content. And I know one of the things you can do on the platform as well is you can actually prevent it having too many items from one item author as well. So I think we've got it covered, but I think that's it really. It's about the security of the content, ensuring that people aren't sharing it and they're only seeing what they have to see to be able to do the job.
And I think that's a great summary. I think, there's a lot of concern about, doing this remotely or asynchronously as opposed to doing it in person. But I think that really demonstrates some of the ways where you actually you can have a better security experience in a remote environment.
It's funny, I spoke to someone today who said, oh, so you do crowdsourcing, and we used to use that term, and it technically is crowdsourcing after you go into a large group of people, but it's not just anyone, it's only the people you want to invite to create content. So yeah.
Yeah, we tried the term expert sourcing for a while. It didn't really catch on, but to try to get that point across. Well, so leading from that, what are, we are seeing new technologies, new innovations coming out in the test fraud area. So what are the ways programs can be proactive to prevent that, even all the way to, as opposed to, I think a lot of security gets focused on the end stage, but where can we start in development as far as protecting against fraud? So Pat, if you want to get started on that one.
Well, I guess we've covered the sort of the creating the content component of it. I was actually trying to work out, I use GPT and Google to try and find out what are the most common types of test fraud, but there isn't actually any published data, and I suspect that's to be expected on the basis that no one wants to share the sort of the bad news about how tests are being compromised. But you get a couple of things, and the most obvious ones are proxy testing, i.e. you get somebody else to take your test for you. Sounds obvious, but that's why you have the ID validation. We've got the option of, having AI ID validation now so that you're able to check someone's ID prior to the point at which they test. So it just makes it easier as far as the candidate's concerned. But also you can put increasing checks in place of using government IDs, etc. So it's making sure the person who takes the exam is the one that you want to take the exam. But then you've also got the other thing is people who are item harvesting. So the people that are going in, take a test and either doing it on, they remember things and then they publish it online, etc. And the simple answer of that one is have more items in your item bank. Again, because we're making it easier to create more content, it means that obviously you can have more versions of the exam, more test forms, etc. If item performance is changing, you can replace it. So it's very important to make sure you've got sufficient items to be able to make sure that you're able to maintain the integrity of the exam over a period of time. So whether you're doing that for multiple forms or you're having an item pool and you're selecting from an item pool. So it's as much as possible that you can do those sort of things. And that makes it more difficult. Of course, you've got the proctoring, so you've got proctors watching, making sure that you're not cheating. You've got lockdown browser so that people aren't able to toggle out, etc. So there are other things you can do as well. And then we've also got customers that are doing performance-based exams as well. But even those have their challenges because performance-based exams, brilliant. It's a practical application rather than learning something. But of course, when you've got those sort of performance-based exams, the one where you have to build this or do this, again, they can be compromised as well. So I think the most reliable way is have lots of content and ensure the candidate is who they say they are, very, very simply. Over to you, Ali.
Yeah, sure. So one of the recent, I guess, security incidents that we've had was a candidate sneaking in a phone during the exam session, which is a prohibited item. So, and the way they were caught was they were wearing glasses, and the proctor could see the reflection of their phone screen in their glasses. So, for all the people joining in, one security tip that they can do is just make their exam font so small that they can just have to wear glasses, and they have better visibility into the exam environment. But in all seriousness, like one of the biggest issues that we've run into is that people have what's called a brain dump. So let's say Patrick and I work in the same company, and Patrick takes the exam. I'm scheduled to take the same exam a week later. I'd go to Patrick, bribe him with some chocolate, and ask him the questions that he's gotten when he was taking his exam. And obviously that hampers exam security, that gives candidates an unfair advantage. And as Patrick said, like the way around it is just have more items in your item banks. And Certiverse has a feature where you can randomize how items are displayed during an exam, and randomize the order of options for each question. So that kind of can mitigate it. And we do ask candidates to not disclose item content. We ask them to sign a candidate agreement when they're taking an exam. So there are ways around it, but it's never going to be perfect. So you just have to make your question bank bigger, I guess.
Great.
It's true that no matter what you do, there's always going to be someone that's going to try and game the system. And I do accept chocolate as bribes, by the way. So that's well selected, that one.
Targeted.
I think the thing is, there's no one single thing that you can do. It's trying to do as much as possible. One piece of data I did find was that it was actually in an academic context, so I guess we can apply it as well, was saying that in a lot of research at universities, candidates that were doing exams that weren't proctored didn't do as well as the candidates, did better than the candidates who were doing proctored exams. So it's a bit of a no-brainer. If you give people the opportunity to be able to cheat or game the system in some way, human nature is that they will do that. So I think you have to have some sort of security in place. Certainly if we're talking about certification exams, things that have to have credibility, reliability, you have to have that integrity in place. As I was saying, otherwise, it's not fair on everybody else. It just devalues the whole program. So it's really important to do that. I know there are some programs that don't, have that certification component. They don't have that credibility of the proctoring, but we're actually working a few organizations now who've just migrated over, who are going from that unproctored to that proctored environment because they realize it adds credibility to their program.
Yeah, and one way to lessen security, which might sound counterintuitive, is to make sure that the candidate feels prepared when they're taking an exam. If they feel prepared, it's going to be less incentive to cheat. So, like having things like practice questions, being more explicit about what the exam topics are going to be, and then offering people services that after taking the exam, some kind of support to help them retake the exam or better prepare for their next attempt. That way, they're less likely to cheat. So, yeah.
That's a great point as well.
Brilliant.
Well, the next question kind of adds a little bit onto to where Patrick left off, and so I will move it over to Ali to continue with these thoughts. But as you are, thinking about proctoring and selecting a partner, what are the considerations and the things that are top of mind to make sure that you are, protecting both the program integrity as well as the candidate trust, which, as you mentioned, like making sure you have happy test takers is an important part of the program as well.
Yeah, so like as a certification program, one of the things that you need to evaluate is the proctor's standard operating procedure. So how do they do their check-in? What do they do between their check-in to exam submission? Do they provide any post-exam proctoring report? This does involve looking at like when they're doing their check-in, what do they require candidates to do? How do they communicate those requirements? What do they do to secure their environment? And you might also need to find out how many exam sessions do proctors proctor at the same time, because if you have a proctor looking at too many sessions, then it's going to lower their efficacy. So you also have to ask what technology do they use. I know that some proctoring services uses AI to track people's eyes and see if they're kind of wandering off or looking at somewhere else, and that will notify the proctor, and that can help kind of catch incidents of cheating. And like one thing you need to also just find out is how responsive are proctors to candidates. If the candidates find that the proctor isn't super responsive, they might be kind of tempted to cheat or to think that, oh, they're not being monitored as closely. And but like on the flip side of that coin, you also have to consider accommodation. So when you're evaluating proctors, look at you need to think about that. Some candidates might consider proctoring too invasive or they feel uncomfortable by it. So the proctoring service has to provide some kind of assistance or help to people who are in that position. Yeah, and just find out what accommodations do the proctoring service provides.
Right.
This is one of those situations where I am going to, with the Year 7 Association, we recently did a survey on this, and we had about 75 respondents. So I can tell you what the people that we surveyed, price was one thing actually that did came up, but of course, value for money in terms of having that solution. Something that did come up, and I think I think you just pointed out, is the candidate experience. So what is the experience for the candidate in terms of what they think is important in terms of when they take the exam? So we've tried as much as possible to make it as easy as possible. So, you know, when you're scheduling an exam, you want to be able to do it in 3 clicks. You don't have to go through lots and lots of processes to be able to book it. A pre-flight checklist, so as much as possible, so that you're not leaving the point at which the candidate takes the exam to check everything works, is doing it in advance, and that's really important. So does everything work? You run the checklist, etc. If you're having a technical issue, I'm a Mac user, so it's always Mac users that have always got the problems, etc. But what you can do is you can raise a ticket, sort out the problem. All right, you take an exam in a month's time, you might change your laptop or you change some of your settings. But as much as possible, it's making sure that you've got that opportunity to be able to check things prior to the exam starting to make sure that the exam experience is as positive as possible. There are other things as well. I mean, obviously we do AI proctoring as well as live proctoring, but I've seen increased interest in live proctoring because of the EU AI Act about having anything that's related to people being employment, etc., that's high stakes, not using AI. Now, I know you've still got people involved in the loop. Sometimes you've got AI picking things and people, but I think the jury's still out on that one at this early stage. And I think the other thing as well, back to the candidates, and I think you just mentioned about eye movement, etc. You've got to be able to manage. It's not a one size fits all. It's not, this is the proctoring, this is all we accept. So you've got to accept that different environments, different locations might have different, different customized components. So for example, you've got someone that's suffering some sort of tics or neurodiversity, etc. Maybe that's not appropriate. Maybe they have to have something different. So I think you have to have a customizable solution, either at an individual level for a person that might have particular requirements, but also at an exam level. I know we have some exams that are 5 or 6 hours long, so you've got to put in comfort breaks in the exams, etc. So you're be able to do that. Perhaps you have open book exams, which again, I know some people have. So the fact that you accept that people are allowed to look at things, books, notes, etc., whatever it might be. So I think you do have to be very, very clear about what you might want and to make sure that that can be met from a candidate perspective. So as well as, of course, making sure they're able to integrate the solution, it's seamless, etc. It's just really making sure that that candidate experience is as positive as possible. I know something that we introduced the end of last year was that if there are any issues at the point at which someone's taking an exam, we'll issue a voucher to the candidate so they can rebook, because exams are stressful time for candidates. And I think your point, Ali, you mentioned before about making sure the candidate is really well prepared is really, really important. But also when it comes to taking the exam, we want them to have a pleasant experience. All right, it's very stressful. You're taking the exam. It's important. Could lead to a promotion or a new job or something like that. So we just want to make it as positive experience as possible.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and one thing that I do like about Certiverse is the ability to customize proctor instructions. So we collect feedback from our candidates, and we use that to write customized proctor instructions just to make sure that the candidate experience is optimal while still prioritizing exam security.
Fantastic.
Good point.
All right, well, we've gotten into this a bit, and again, we don't have to be fully specific to the platform. I think there's a lot of pieces that can be involved, but how does the choice of technology help balance the ease of use for the program staff and your subject matter experts, which again are doing two different jobs that are important as far as getting things moving forward, along with the need for security controls. I think a thing that we're trying to figure out in the world is, again, that human element. How do you keep it human friendly but still maintain security and integrity? So Pat, I'm going to start with that.
Just before I start, because actually it's linked to this, Andrew Balk has just said, for question 1, I would just add auditing. It should always be possible to run an audit report to see who exactly has had access to what. Very, very true, in all honesty. And that brings us to this one as well, because we have the job task analysis, the blueprinting, the content creation, the test creation, etc., and the delivery, all within the same platform. We're able to monitor everything. So we've got a full audit trail of every item, from when it was created to when it's been delivered, how many times it's being delivered. So that audit report, in fact, if you're ANSI or NCCA, accredited, that's a requirement. So a very good point, Andrew, about making sure that we have everything is documented so that you're able to track everything. So that's a good point. In terms of the choice of technology, I mean, I guess, and I am totally biased here, obviously, having an integrated platform that enables you to do everything in one place, and it's a cloud native platform. We create, as an organization, we've been going for 4 years. Everything is built from a technology perspective in terms of using technology most effective, making it easy for candidates, ensuring they have a positive experience, the navigation. It's really, really important. I've already talked about the role-based access, but you can't stress enough the fact that by having everything that you're doing within the platform designed ideally in an ideal way to make sure it's fit for purpose. I mean, probably 2/3 of the new things that we introduce on the platform are actually things requested by customers. They say, would be really good if you have this. We thought, oh, that's a brilliant idea, let's add that. So it's something that's not static. It's not we've developed it and that's it. It's constantly being enhanced, things being added just to improve it, to make sure that it's as good as possible. And like I said about I mentioned about the role-based access, those security controls. Initially we had defined roles. Now you can basically customize it so that any individual can have access to a very granular level to the things that they need to be able to do whatever the tasks they need to do in the platform. So putting it at that very granular level makes it hugely impactful in terms of managing both your staff, but also third parties who might be using the platform as well.
Right. And Ali, do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, I just want to say that it is a tough balancing act, because on the one hand you have the exam security, but you also want to make sure that your staff and your SMEs have a good experience using the platform. So really it just comes down to collecting feedback from platform users, but also role playing. So taking the role of a SME and seeing what their experience is using the platform, and using that to kind of communicate with Certiverse, communicate with the platform admins, and see if there is a way to improve the experience while also maintaining security. So it's really just about collecting feedback, working with the platform, and trying to find that right balance between security and user experience.
Right. We have just one more pre-planned question. If anyone has anything that they would like to ask as well, just again, please feel free to drop that in the chat. Otherwise, we will move forward with our last plan. So this is, kind of about the discoveries that have happened along the way. So what are the, maybe unexpected things or insights that you've come across about the process of maintaining exam reliability and fairness across these, remote and sometimes global delivery environments, both from the development and the delivery side?
Yeah, and I'm not sure how unexpected it is, but I'll say that like time zones and language barriers become paramount when you're working in a global delivery platform. I know that if a candidate is in France and they experience issues, then we may not be working when they're communicate with us. So it's all about just like being flexible, monitoring your channels of communication, and just being prompt and open when you're working with candidates in different time zones. And like when it comes to the language barrier thing, I know that Certiverse has a feature where you can communicate with proctors using languages other than English, and it uses an auto translation. I was looking at a candidate's experience and their recording, and I did see that they were communicating in Spanish with a proctor. So like having a service that allows candidates to communicate in different languages does make the process easier. And but for when it comes to security, if you have a global pool of candidates, you need to watch out that when you're, let's say, doing a security check and you're looking for item leaks, that you look globally. So you look in different regions, because when you're like scraping the web, you might only see results for your particular region. So you have to kind of just expand your search, make sure that your security goes to where the candidate is.
A great point. Pat, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I'm just going to take a bit of a wider perspective and focus on the fairness and reliability component. Because it's easier to create content and lots of content, it means you can have a wider group of SMEs based anywhere in the world. I mean, most of us work for global organizations that are working everywhere. So it makes it a lot easier. And that's from the fairness component, is to make sure that you're not disadvantaging one group or another. So it just makes it easier having to have a lot more content. And because you've got a lot more content created from a more diverse community, that helps on the reliability. So it means you've got sufficient forms, you're able to replace items if they stop performing. So that reliability about how an exam performs over a period of time. And because it's easier to create more content, because it's easier to create more exam forms, I mean, we're using AI now to help create forms. So you don't have to be a psychometrician, you don't have to be an expert. So if you can create content easy and create exams easy, there's no reason why you can't have, 5 forms, 10 forms, 20 forms, as many as you want, so that you're able to ensure that over time you can maintain the quality of your program. Plus, of course, you don't have to create all the items at once. What you can do is you think, right, initially might not be a huge uptake. It's a new exam. You think we might need 2 forms. We want 100 items plus 10% extra, etc. You write the items you need, and then on an ongoing basis, you can just create more items. And what that enables you to do then is you're able to either precede, unmarked items in tests so that you can collect the data for them, etc. So there's lots and lots of opportunities, but the key at that sort of distant level is it's overall how you can help on the program, how you can make sure to maintain that fairness and reliability.
Fantastic. Well, that brings us to time. If you did think of any questions you didn't have a chance to provide, of course, you can reach out to us at answers@certiverse.com, or either of our panelists directly on LinkedIn or various other platforms as well. And we look forward to seeing you at our next session, and we'll be sending out a recording as well. So we'd be happy if you shared with other folks who might be interested. So thanks again. Have a great day. We'll see you next time.
Good.